Flames crawled up the hallway floorboards faster than any child inside the dorm could run. The girls who woke first felt the heat before they saw the light. A thin orange glow rising beneath the door, as if someone were holding a lantern against it. By the time the first scream broke through the Wichita night, smoke was already pushing through the cracks, climbing the bunk beds, sealing off the only exit. Outside, frost clung to the windows, turning the glass into a pale mirror that reflected the fire eating the room from the inside. The matron, a woman named Sarah Dunley, tried to force the door open, but the metal knob scorched her palm. The roar behind the wood sounded too big, too fast, too alive. She managed to get 3 girls out through the hallway, but the 4th was still trapped near the window, coughing as the flames reached her bed. Neighbors would later swear they heard a boy's voice shouting orders from inside the blaze, though no boy lived in that wing. By the time firefighters broke down the wall, the child was gone, and the room was a blackened shell. It was the first death at the Wichita Children's Home that winter, and no one thought it would happen again. The orphanage had stood on North Emporia Avenue for decades, a plain brick building that tried to look warmer than it felt. Children cycled through every few months, runaways, abandoned infants, siblings separated from their parents by illness or poverty. The staff worked long hours and slept lightly, knowing that any small noise might mean a restless kid or a sudden emergency. But fire was not something they had prepared for. The electrical system had been updated the year before. No candles were allowed in the dorms. Matches were locked away. Still, 10 days after the first fire, another one started. This time it was in the boys' wing. A volunteer named Calvin Marks spotted the glow while making his rounds, a faint shimmer behind the supply room door. When he opened it, flames climbed the mop handles and raced up the shelving unit like they'd been waiting for oxygen. The children were asleep only a few feet away, separated by a single wall. Marks grabbed a blanket, beat the fire back long enough to reach the alarm, and dragged 2 boys from their bunks before smoke filled the hallway. Everyone survived, but the room looked as if someone had poured kerosene along the baseboards. Investigators noted a strange, repeating burn pattern on the floor, almost serpentine, almost deliberate. Rumors spread faster than answers. One child whispered that she had seen a pale figure near the laundry room the night before the fire. Another said a former resident had died there years ago and now roamed the halls. Staff dismissed the stories, but some of the older children swore they felt cold spots even when the heaters were running at full blast. A few refused to sleep with the lights off. The Wichita Fire Department brought in investigators who combed every inch of the damaged rooms. They checked wiring, analyzed ash, and interviewed staff, but nothing fit neatly. There were no faulty outlets, no spilled chemicals, no malfunctioning heaters. The only common thread was the speed of ignition, faster than what would come from a simple spark. They began to suspect someone living inside the building. The staff hated the implication. These kids had already lived through abandonment, hunger, and fear. To think one of them might be setting fires felt like another trauma layered on top of the old ones. But the investigators insisted they had to look at everyone. The next fire happened before they finished their interviews. It broke out in the girls' playroom just before dawn. A janitor spotted flames licking the underside of a table, spreading in a smooth oval shape across the rug. No electricity ran beneath that area. No heater stood near it. The children were rushed out into the freezing morning, huddled together in thin pajamas, watching another part of their temporary home vanish under black smoke. This time, 2 younger girls were found unconscious from smoke inhalation. One never regained consciousness. Her name was Lila. She was 6 years old, soft-spoken, and had arrived at the home only a month earlier after her mother died of pneumonia. She had a habit of clutching her sweater sleeves when she was nervous. The staff placed flowers on her bunk and tried to reassure the other children that they were safe, but the older ones didn't believe it. They spoke about the ghost again, about shadows that moved at the corners of their vision, about footsteps in empty corridors. And with every new story, belief tightened its grip. The investigators, though, were less convinced. They now treated the orphanage as a crime scene. They stayed overnight, hidden in offices and behind doorways, waiting to see who might wander where they shouldn't. They reviewed chores, schedules, meal logs, and bedroom assignments. They interviewed each child again, this time asking where they were at the exact moments the fires started. One boy, 11-year-old Thomas Wilkins, stood out. He had been near each fire, though not close enough to place blame. He was quiet, withdrawn, older than most kids there. Staff said he had a habit of walking the hallways at night when he couldn't sleep. Investigators asked him why. He shrugged and said he didn't like dreams. They asked if he'd seen anything unusual before the fires. He nodded but offered no details. When pressed, he said he didn't want to talk about it because people already think things. Still, nothing tied him to the fires. No soot on his clothes, no matches in his belongings, no eyewitnesses. And yet something about him unsettled the investigators. A flatness in his voice, a reluctance to make eye contact, the way he lingered near the burned rooms as if waiting for something. The breakthrough came not from a child, but from a staff member. One of the matrons found a small pile of charred paper scraps beneath a stairwell, a place investigators had already checked. The scraps looked like pieces of children's drawings, the kind they pinned on the common room wall. Someone had torn them down and tried to burn them there, though the fire had died before catching the building. Among the drawings was one of a house with flames rising from the roof and a stick figure standing in the doorway, smiling. When investigators showed the scraps to Thomas, he stared at them for a long time. Then he asked if he was allowed to go back to bed. Something in his expression changed, a stiffening, as if caught between confession and retreat. They searched his bunk and found more drawings hidden under the mattress, all showing fires in different parts of the orphanage. In one picture, the flames curled around a girl's bed, the same bed where Lila had slept. When confronted, Thomas didn't cry. He didn't argue. He only said he didn't want to hurt anyone, that he wanted people to notice things, that he felt invisible unless something big happened. He admitted he liked watching the flames because they moved the way he wished he could, fast, loud, impossible to ignore. It was not the confession they expected, but it was enough. Thomas was removed from the home that same day and taken for psychiatric evaluation. The children were relocated to temporary housing while contractors repaired the building. Staff held a memorial for Lila, attended by the entire neighborhood. The rumors about the ghost faded quickly once the truth settled in. The Wichita Children's Home reopened months later with new alarms, new supervision rules, and quiet reminders of how close they had come to losing more lives. For years after, some residents claimed they still felt uneasy walking the hall at night, as if the memory of those fires clung to the walls even after the smoke was gone. But no more flames ever rose inside the building again. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories, if you dare.